General Dynamics IT is committed to supporting the U.S. Coast Guard in advancing the nation's defense and maritime security operations and capabilities. Our innovative solutions provide the expertise, engineering, and technical excellence needed to address today's urgent homeland security priorities. For more information, visit gdit.com.
Hello and welcome to Homeland Security Today's Futurecast on Coast Guard recapitalization. I'm here today with retired Rear Admiral Joel Whitehead, and we'll be discussing a little bit about how the Coast Guard responds in natural disasters and other emergencies, and how important recapitalization is to maintaining those capabilities now and in the future. Joel, thank you for being here today.
Glad to be here, Mickey. Thanks.
Can you tell me a little bit about your time in the Coast Guard and some of the natural disasters and other emergencies that you responded to?
Sure. Well, I spent 38 years in the Coast Guard. My first four at the United States Coast Guard Academy, and then after that I was a commissioned officer for 34 years. I started off shipboard like everybody in from the Coast Guard Academy does, and spent time on the cutter Morgenthau. And after that I went into my specialty, which became marine safety and security. And in that field, I served a lot of time around different ports in the United States, initially doing shipboard inspections, casualty investigations, and emergency management for oil spills and that sort of thing. I also spent a significant amount of time, about a year as a matter of fact, in Valdez, Alaska during the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and also was second in command of the first, what they call the Superfund, hazardous chemical cleanup back in the 80s. And I served in a variety of ports doing search and rescue law enforcement work as well. And then finally retired, in my last tour, I retired in 2009. And I served there in New Orleans as the 8th Coast Guard District Commander in New Orleans for 3 years.
You were directly on you saw the Exxon Valdez oil spill and the aftermath of that. A number of hurricanes that hit the Gulf Coast while you were on the Gulf Coast. Can you tell me what Coast Guard assets were important in those individual sorts of disasters? How were they used?
Well, if you look back to the Exxon Valdez, here you had an oil spill that literally moved down the coast of Alaska, and so we had to have a very strong seagoing capability there with C4ISR. That's what we would call C4ISR now anyway, that could manage many, many assets out there. So we started off, of course the spill occurred near Valdez, Alaska, but the currents brought it to the west. And so we were in Valdez literally managing the oil spill along with the state of Alaska and with Exxon for several months. And then the spill occurred in March of '89. And then by October, we had moved to Anchorage because the spill was moving west. But we had a 378-foot high-endurance cutter presence there to help us manage all of those assets with its communications capability, capability to land helicopters, that sort of thing, and to be able to manage all those assets that were out there, hundreds and hundreds of assets.
You mentioned the high-endurance cutter, and since you did, I want to take a minute to talk about the importance of that particular platform. And, it's used in all sorts of different Coast Guard operations, particularly as a central, point for forces to deploy, for, communications to occur, for, all the support that it gives to all the Coast Guard sailors who respond to all these things. That platform has really been failing quite a bit in recent years. And I'm wondering if you can give me some perspective as to how important it is that we make sure that they're replaced.
Sure. Well, the high-endurance cutter, the 378-foot high-endurance cutter was, originally constructed in the late 60s. Many of them served in Vietnam. They have been real workhorses for the Coast Guard. They're our largest regular class, or they were until recently, and now we're replacing those WHECs, as we call them, high-endurance cutters, with the new National Security Cutter. So we have 12 of the high-endurance cutters. We had 12. and we're trying to replace those with the new National Security Cutter, which is a lot larger ship. It's about 426 feet, but with much greater capability. But the difficulty right now that the Coast Guard is experiencing is that right now we don't have congressional funding to replace all 12. So you have a real need, because of the areas that we operate in, for a large ship, such as a 378-foot cutter or the National Security Cutter, to replace it. But we don't have the congressional buy-in yet to replace all of them. So we have 12 right now, and we have 6 that have been confirmed by Congress that they'll replace. We're hoping very much to get at least 8. And the difficulty, as you can imagine, is this ship will operate in areas where a smaller Coast Guard cutter can't. And to give you an example, the 378-foot cutter has been our workhorse up in the Western Pacific, in Alaska, and in the Bering Sea in particular, where we're enforcing international fishery laws. We tried sending up a 270-foot cutter up there to the Bering Sea to see how it would do, not expecting that there would be real problems, but that it would have difficulty. And boy, it did. It was really beat up by the time they had spent a little bit of time up there, and it really confirmed, I think, for current Coast Guard officials that they have to have a lot larger ship to operate up there, which means that 6 may not be enough. We probably need at least 8. I know from speaking to the Commandant recently in my role as the chairman of the Coast Guard Affairs Committee for the Navy League of the United States, he recently indicated that they would like to operate 4 of the National Security Cutters all the time, all 4 of them underway, and that would provide coverage in the Bering Sea and the Pacific, off Latin America for drug interdiction, that sort of thing, and in the Pacific West Coast as well. And to operate 4, you really need at least 8, and that's cutting it thin. The Navy generally operates 1 ship underway for every 4 they have, so there's 3 that are in major overhauls or in port or training and that sort of thing. And we have traditionally operated with 2 for 1. So 8 is going to stretch it. So we really need at least those 8 right now.
Interestingly, the first National Security Cutter just completed Operation Arctic Shield, and initial reports are that it did do very well. A bigger, more stable platform, and it was able to perform everything that the Coast Guard asked it to do.
Yeah. I've heard the same thing. I've gotten several reports from people who have been on patrol with it, and they're very happy with it.
Hurricanes. You had a front row seat for a couple of hurricane responses, and now we just got through Hurricane Sandy, and the Coast Guard's role there was very important. It can't be understated, although there wasn't as much dramatic rescue as there was perhaps after Hurricane Katrina. What does the Coast Guard need to appropriately respond to a hurricane?
Well, when you look at a natural event like a hurricane, tornado, something of that nature, but particularly hurricanes that we're so used to, it's not just after the event, it's also before the event. There's an awful lot that has to happen before the event. We have an old saying in the Coast Guard that, when the disaster happens is not the time to be passing out business cards. And what that really gets down to is that, you don't want to have an accident, a terrible, calamity like that happen and not know the people personally that you have to deal with. So it's very important, and the Coast Guard, I think, does a great job of meeting all those people beforehand and establishing personal relationships of trust so that, there's not strangers in the room that are trying to offer suggestions and make decisions. And that was certainly the case in Katrina. I came in 6 months after Katrina or 8 months after Katrina, but I had been there from 2001 to 2003, so I know how we operate typically down there. And that is that we're very, very comfortable in working with the maritime industry. We know the local government. We know the parish presidents. We know the state officials down there in all the states. We know the emergency management and homeland security chiefs for each of the states down there. So there's no loss of, nobody goes to one of these events and doesn't know the key players. And that really has so much to do with the ability to make really good decisions because people trust each other. They feel like they can offer a solution or an idea without it being batted down and somebody knows exactly what to do. And we're also very familiar with those areas, and that's, I think, is the strength of the Coast Guard as well, is that the Coast Guard, through its local operations and presence in the communities, really knows the local waterways. We know all the local players, and it just makes a tremendous difference beforehand. Now, afterwards, of course, Katrina was quite an unusual situation because nobody anticipated a flooding of an urban area like this. And we had actually done rescues like that in the Gulf Coast I believe it was in the 70s or maybe the 80s, but it had not been done for a long time, and I would say it was probably an unexpected event. But we had the capability. We had an air station down there, and we had the capability of moving other aircraft down there. And if you recall, we actually moved aircraft from every Coast Guard air station in the United States to Katrina to be able to help out. And we couldn't just move all the close ones. You couldn't take all of the aircraft out of Houston, for example, because you still had to be able to carry out search and rescue, that sort of thing all the time. So we would pull out one aircraft from many stations. And one of the interesting things that I thought was really great was I had been at one point stationed on Cape Cod at Woods Hole as the deputy group commander there. And one of the very neat things was our air station up there. They did send their entire fleet of aircraft down, and the only reason they could do that was because we had a strong working relationship with the Canadian Coast Guard. And the Canadians sent down aircraft to stay on Cape Cod, and they covered our search and rescue capability needs down there while Coast Guard aircraft were down in the Gulf.
Earlier you mentioned the C4 ISR, and I want to kind of close with that because you've got all of these Coast Guard capabilities, cutters, aircraft, and you've got a need to keep them all interlinked. And sort of as a closing thought, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your perspective on, how we're doing on making sure that these have an interlink, they're interoperable, and everybody can talk to each other.
Yeah. For many years we operated Coast Guard cutters, and it's going to be hard for the public to understand this really, but we operated our cutters, whether they were the small patrol boats or the larger medium and high endurance cutters, and our helicopters and our aircraft without the complete capability of being able to communicate. So we often had to transfer our telephone or our communications through shore facilities. So the new systems that we have are going to be pretty much interoperable, and we'll be able to communicate with a small patrol boat or like the new fast response cutter that we're in construction on right now, which is just a great craft, to our helicopters, to our C-130s, to our CASAs, to our shore facilities in a way that will be quick and enable us to have full communication and secure communications, which is important.
And the groundwork so far, when we have the new offshore patrol cutter coming down the road in a few years, it'll just be able to link right into all these other things.
Absolutely, yeah. Ideally, and I don't know exactly whether this is going to happen, but I know they're aiming towards this, is that the national security cutter, the 426-footer, the offshore patrol cutter, and the FRC, the fast response cutter, it's about 156 feet, that they'll all be purely interoperable, and that's important for many reasons. One, obviously for the communications and the success in operations, but also in the training and logistics. We want to stock the same parts if we can, for as many classes of vessels the same as we have. And we want to have the same kind of equipment to the extent we can on all of those vessels, so that when a sailor goes from one class of ship to another, he's not relearning whole new systems. He doesn't have to go to school to learn how to operate a particular weapon system or a particular communication system. He's familiar with it already, and maybe need a refresher, but it's kind of the same. And those will be very, very important to us as we go along. And the OPC, since you mentioned it, I do want to mention it. The national security cutters we talked about before, if we construct only 6 of those, the real problem is going to be we're going to have the United States will have a tremendous capabilities gap, because the offshore patrol cutter isn't due to come online until about 2018 or so if everything works out well. The national security cutters will be through construction by then, and at the rate we are decommissioning our 378-foot cutters, which is greater than we're building new ships, we're going to have suddenly a drop for several years probably in a capability to respond and to be able to provide services, particularly in those in the Pacific and in the Bering Sea and Alaska area. And those are very important areas for us to be able to operate in. So that offshore patrol cutter, in my mind, you can't replace 12 high endurance cutters with 6. So it may be that we may need to, Congress may find it the right thing to do to authorize construction of a few more of those OPCs to be able to fill in that capability gap.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today, Joel.
Thank you.
We enjoyed hearing about your perspectives and experiences on this.
Thank you very much.